going to get going. Hello, Ms. Hogan. I'm moving so I can see you. J'ouvre maintenant la séance. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 34 du comité permanent compte public de la Chambre des communes. Conformément à l'article 108.3G du règlement de la motion adoptée par le comité le 21 octobre 2022, le comité se réunit d'aujourd'hui dans le cadre de son étude sur le rapport 1, l'accès aux prestations sur les populations difficiles à joindre 2022. Rapport
Access to services by hard-to-reach populations.
To benefits for hard-to-reach populations of the 2022 reports 1 to 4 of the Auditor General of Canada. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses who are joining us both here in person and virtually. From the Office of the Auditor General, we have Ms. Karen Hogan, the Auditor General. Nice to see you. And Nicholas Swales is returning as well. Nice to see you as well, sir. From the Canada Revenue Agency, Bob Hamilton, Commissioner of Revenue and Chief Executive Officer by video conference. I'm not going to try to find you all on the screen because there are at least 12 boxes in front of me. So I'm just going to acknowledge you're here, and if you're not, the clerk will inform me in a few minutes. Next up is Maxime Gainette, Assistant Commissioner, Service, Innovation, and Integration Branch, also by video conference. Gillian Prank, Assistant Commissioner, Assessment, Benefits, and Service Branch by video conference. Next department is the Department of Employment and Social Development. Laurie McDonald, Senior Associate Deputy Minister, Employment and Social Development and Chief Operating Officer for Service Canada by video conference. Tammy Bélanger, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Benefits and Integrated Services Branch by video conference. Atik Rahman, Assistant Deputy Minister, Learning Branch by video conference. And then finally, from Statistics Canada, José Béguin, Director General, Labour Market, Education, and Socio-Economic Well-Being by video conference, and Andrew Heist, Director, Centre for Income and Socio-Economic Well-Being, Statistics Canada, Centre for Income and Socio-Economic Well-Being, Statistics by video conference. Excuse me for that. You'll each have, each department and agency will have 5 minutes right off the top for your opening statements. Ms. Hogan, we begin with you or one of your officials. Over to you for 5 minutes, please.
Excusez-moi, Monsieur le Président, juste valider.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Could we just make sure that sound tests were done with all participants because they are all on Zoom? Yes, I think it was done. Yes, thank you. As usual, it was done. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving us this opportunity to discuss our report on difficult-to-reach populations tabled on May 31st, 2022. First of all, I'd like to recognize that we are in the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I am with Mr. Swales, who was responsible for the audit. We offer many programs to help Canadians come out of poverty and reduce inequality. These programs can achieve their goals only if those who are eligible to receive benefits are aware of them and can access them. The Canada Revenue Agency and Employment and Social Development Canada know that some individuals are not accessing the benefits available to them. These individuals include low-income members of groups who are not easily served through regular channels, such as Indigenous people, seniors, newcomers to Canada, or people with disabilities. These hard-to-reach populations require more help from the government. For this audit, we wanted to know whether the Canada Revenue Agency and Employment and Social Development Canada ensured that hard-to-reach populations were made aware of and could access the Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Workers Benefit, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, and the Canada Learning Bond. We found that the government lacked a clear and complete picture of the people who were not accessing benefits. The government estimated that overall, a high proportion of low-income people were receiving the benefits. However, the agency and department overstated the rates of people accessing benefits because they did not always account for people who had not filed income tax returns. Filing a tax return is required to access most benefits.
Agency and department have increased their efforts to raise awareness of benefits among people who most need them. Outreach activities have focused on hard-to-reach populations who are more likely to have modest incomes and often face barriers to accessing benefits. These populations include people who may be unaware of available benefits or reluctant to interact with government organizations. We found that, despite these efforts, the department and agency had not developed measures to assess the impacts of outreach activities. For example, they could not measure increases in the rate of benefit take-up for targeted groups over time or in related impacts such as increased tax filing by those groups over time. Finally, we found that service approaches for helping people who required more personalized support were not sufficiently integrated between the agency and the department. The agency and the department had initiated some pilot projects to work with community groups on more individualized support, but they had not established an integrated service delivery approach. Better collection and use of disaggregated data would improve their ability to understand and identify barriers and target outreach. Statistics Canada is an important partner in data collection, measurement, and analysis. Although the agency and department have taken some action, they still have not done enough to connect people with benefits. As a result, they are failing to improve the lives of some individuals and families who may need these benefits the most. We made 3 recommendations as a result of this audit. The Canada Revenue Agency, Employment and Social Development Canada, and Statistics Canada agreed with these recommendations. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Auditor General. I'll turn now to the CRA for your opening remarks. You have 5 minutes, please. Mr. Hamilton, will you be making the opening remarks for the CRA? Or have you designated someone?
No.
Oh, you're on. Apparently, you're on mute. Pardon me.
I either put myself on.
No problem.
Anyway,
I haven't started the timer. Yeah, there's a bar here, so I couldn't see that. So if you'd like to start from the top again, I'll reset the clock.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah.
Perfect. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity to discuss the CRA's response to the Auditor General of Canada's Report 1, Access to Benefits for Hard-to-Reach Populations. Today I'm accompanied by 2 agency assistant commissioners, Gillian Pranke of the Assessment Benefits and Services Branch and Maxime Guénette. First, I want to recognize the excellent work of the agency employees during the COVID-19 pandemic who have been supporting Canadians in accessing benefits and credits to which they are entitled.
Many links to do so. And despite the impacts of the pandemic over the past 3 filing seasons, our employees have been able to provide billions of dollars in urgent support to help millions of Canadians. When it comes to hard-to-reach populations, the agency has taken many steps to continue to reach the most vulnerable. In fact, when many tax clinics that are part of the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program, the CVITP, were set to close in March 2020, the CRA quickly pivoted to alter processes so as to keep these clinics up and running, many in a virtual format. These approaches remain in place and provide much greater flexibility and access to those in need. Over the 2017 to 2020 period, there has been roughly a 7% increase in individuals who have accessed the CRA's CVITP. The number of tax returns filed has increased by over 11%, and the number of individuals that were assisted during outreach sessions has increased by over 15%. The CRA is making it easier for individuals, especially from at-risk populations, to access important benefits and credits by enhancing the funding available to CVITP clinics. Minister Leboutillier recently announced a new formula for the CVITP grant that will increase the amount of money awarded to organizations through the grant each year, helping them cover the cost of hosting free tax clinics. It also recognizes the unique challenges of organizations that serve Northern and Indigenous communities. Thus, we are proud to have been able to implement this important part of the Minister of National Revenue's mandate letters for the past 5 years. With respect to the specific recommendations in Report 1, the CRA has noted it agrees with all 3 recommendations from the Auditor General. Although we are proud of our achievements in this area, we also recognize that there is much more work to be done. Indeed, the CRA has provided a detailed action plan to the committee already outlining how we will work towards meeting all of the recommendations and the timeline for those initiatives. Ainsi, l'agence continue.
This will include, among other things, continuing to work with ESDC to ensure alignment in the prioritization, planning, and monitoring of work related to the take-up of benefits by hard-to-reach populations. And as well, continuing to leverage Statistic Canada's expertise, including the most recent census data from 2021, to gain more insight into hard-to-reach populations.
CRA is committed to improving its client service to Canada, including our country's most vulnerable, through its People First service philosophy. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm now happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. The questions are still a few minutes out, but I appreciate that. Turning now to the Department of Employment and Social Development. You have 5 minutes for one of your officials to make an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the invitation to appear before the committee today and for the opportunity to discuss the Auditor General's report on benefits for hard-to-reach Canadians populations. I'm joined here today by Assistant Deputy Ministers Tammy Belanger and Atik Rahman, and Director General Social Policy, Strategic and Service Policy, Hugues Valancourt. D'abord, je tiens à dire que
First, I want to say that the Government of Canada welcomes the Auditor General's report, and we wholeheartedly accept her recommendations.
Looking for ways to improve services to Canadians and to better support hard-to-reach people across the country. Many vulnerable Canadians do face barriers in accessing government services or benefits for a variety of reasons. For example, certain people do not appear in administrative databases. They do not and are not required to file taxes. In these cases, it becomes difficult, even impossible, to remind them to apply for a benefit by mail or by phone because we can't find them and we don't know where they are, and they may not know how to access us. The audit's main finding was that the government did not have a clear and complete picture of the people who were not receiving benefits to which they may be entitled. Our department has been working to overcome this challenge for some time.
We strive to reach all Canadians, no matter where they live or in what circumstances. But I agree that we need to do more.
In 2020, Service Canada introduced the Reaching All Canadians initiative designed specifically to increase benefit uptake and eliminate barriers to access and delivery. Through this initiative, we have been connecting directly with communities and organizations who can refer clients to us or help us identify new clients who wouldn't otherwise be known to us. For example, working with the Rainbow Resource Center in Winnipeg, we help members of the 2S LGBTQI+ community regarding benefit entitlements associated with common law partnerships. And we work directly with their Trans ID Clinic coordinator to help those with questions about changing gender designations on government identification, social insurance numbers, passports, and employment insurance. Those are just examples where we're reaching out to hard to reach populations to make those connections. We also work with service delivery providers such as Islington Senior Shelter in Ontario to reach seniors living in homelessness or poverty. Partnerships like this help deliver to clients who may face accessibility, literacy, or technological barriers to ensure that they are obtaining their GIS, CPP, OAS, and potentially other benefits to which they may be entitled. We have also resumed regular community and outreach liaison services to residents of rural, remote, northern, and Indigenous communities. Last year, almost 100,000 clients were served directly through this work, and almost 80,000 this year as of September 30th. We meet directly with individuals within those communities to help them with their unique needs. Bien entendu, la pandémie de
Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic did have an impact on our ability to reach some communities and individuals. In April 2020, we launched the Outreach Support Center to provide immediate, direct, and personalized toll-free phone service to Indigenous communities and clients facing the same barriers identified within the AG's report.
Service now helps tens of thousands of Canadians every year. Last year, the support center received over 27,000 calls and provided nearly 32,000 services to hard-to-reach Canadians. We also reach as many Canadians as we can through the mail and by phone. Over the last 5 years, Service Canada and the CRA mailed over 425,000 GIS applications and received over 250,000 completed applications. By phone, we contact seniors directly to help ensure they can renew their GIS benefits. For example, last year we called 100,000 seniors by phone, helping result in 43,000 renewed GIS benefits. Nous continuerons également à
We will also continue to work closely with our colleagues at Canada Revenue Agency to share information, identify best practices, and collaborate on data collection where needed and where appropriate.
Work includes ensuring as many people as possible automatically receive benefits when entitled. For example, all eligible OAS individuals are automatically put into pay in the month after they turn 65. Since 2014, 1.4 million Canadians were auto-enrolled in OAS. Ensuring reliable and accessible services to all Canadians, regardless of where they live, remains a top priority for my department. This is how we will achieve improving outcomes for Canadians from all walks of life. Thank you for asking us to be here today.
Et merci beaucoup, Madame McDonald.
Thank you very much, Ms. McDonald. Finally, we have Statistics Canada. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of Statistics Canada to discuss the measures taken by Statistics Canada to improve services for hard-to-reach populations. Statistics Canada is participating with Canada Revenue Agency and Employment and Social Development Canada on a joint action plan with specific activities and deliverables geared towards improving understanding of benefit take-up. Since summer 2022, we've been working together to identify governance for the joint program and discuss strategies to develop performance measures.
Uptake and performance measures. In our response to the OAG recommendation, we highlighted the substantial statistical difficulties with calculating accurate benefit take-up rates. The statistical system relies on data from programs that are taken up by the population. Thus, inherently, when someone does not use these programs or is ineligible or not aware of them, it creates a challenge. This relates to the importance of developing new strategies to assess benefit take-up as indicated in the action plan. We do, however, have data sources and methods to estimate the population that is missed or not in scope and provide their characteristics such that policymakers can target efforts to better include them. Through data integration of administrative data with other data holdings of StatCan, we can describe the numbers of recipients belonging to particular age, sex, racialized, indigenous identity, or another population or at-risk group. Statistics Canada is also well placed to provide information on groups more or less at risk of not receiving benefits to which they may be entitled for reasons of not filing their taxes. Through tabulation of linked data sets, Statistics Canada can determine population groups that are less likely to be tax filers. While these measures only approximate the benefit take-up rate, this information can be used to target outreach to particular communities. It is important to underscore that Statistics Canada's action cannot include the sharing of confidential microdata. This means that we cannot identify individuals, but rather can provide information about the characteristics of those who are at risk of not receiving benefits. However, CRA and ESDC can access anonymized microdata through Statistics Canada Research Data Center Hub or through other secure means. StatCan has a number of other initiatives that are designed to better understand this important group with the necessary safeguards that protects privacy and confidentiality, and is continuing to explore new innovative ways to shed important light on this element of our population. For example, an existing partnership which will be leveraged to respond to the recommendation is the Tax Research Advisory Group, co-led by Statistics Canada and CRA. This group serves as a collaborative partnership between CRA and StatCan to share knowledge and expertise relating to methodology, tax data, tax administration, and tax process understanding. The Tax Data Research Group is already discussing new research relevant to the OAG recommendations on using behavioral economic analysis to investigate the value of nudges to encourage people to file taxes, and an analysis of benefit receipt among marginalized groups, notably new immigrants, including refugee claimants. In another initiative, ESDC and Statistics Canada are working towards the establishment of a joint data strategy that will build on existing collaboration and data sharing agreements to create a more strategic partnership that goes beyond data. The joint data strategy proposes to prioritize action on data access and data acquisition for statistical purposes and the development of data standards. En résumé,
In summary, Statistics Canada is well prepared to carry out the action plan with CRA and ESDC to improve the measurement of benefit take-up. Once the details of a plan have been agreed upon, Statistics Canada will present funding requirements to federal partners to allow for the work to proceed if necessary. I thank you again for having invited Statistics Canada to speak here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Et merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much to all our witnesses today.
Round, which will have every recognized party, 4 members asking questions for up to 6 minutes. I'll turn now to Mr. Macaulay from the official opposition, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A.G. Hogan, Mr. Swales, welcome back again, and other witnesses. I just want to start with you, Ms. Hogan. We're talking about vulnerable populations. Who is defining vulnerable populations, or what do we have to define what is vulnerable so they're not just lumped into like one group, because not all in northern hard to reach are actual vulnerable. So I'm curious how we're defining that so that we can target, so to speak, the right people we need to be directing resources to.
So we actually started off our audit with asking exactly that question when we did this, and we started with the Canada Revenue Agency and Employment and Social Development Canada and how they defined it. We included that information in Exhibit 1.2. And as we went through our work, we focused on the fact that these are benefit programs meant to lift people out of poverty. And so it would be individuals within target groups that are at that lower than poverty level, right? So it isn't the entire group of people who are elderly. So it's really about, that income-based approach, and that's why we included the definition in here, because we thought it was really important for the readers of our report to understand who was being targeted.
Thanks. Now, you've stated that, and this has come up previous studies, that the departments lack a clear picture of who their outreach help. Like, how long, I guess I want to ask, how long has this been going on? Is this a new issue for them? Has this been repeatedly brought to them? Is this brand new issue?
Well, I feel like I should start with telling you why we actually launched this audit, right?
Please.
So back in 2019, we did an audit on the Canada Child Benefit. And we found in that report that the Canada Revenue Agency did a great job in a timely way of delivering the child benefit to those who had applied. And so the outstanding question was, well, are you reaching those most vulnerable, those that need it the most? Because when they're in the system, it works effectively for them. And that's when we started on, well, let's look at a whole bunch of programs. So I can't tell you for how long it's existed, but we looked at a period between April of 2019 and August of 2021.
Let me pose the question to the CRA then, is how long has this been on your radar? Is it just a recent phenomena, or?
Yes, I wouldn't call it a recent phenomenon. It's a challenge, and I think the one thing that when you read the Auditor General's report that we would all.
Sorry, how long has it been an issue that you've been aware of, that CRA's been aware of?
Well, certainly.
Just to, 1 second, I heard a point of order, I think. Did I hear a point of order?
Yes.
Yes, sir. You're so calm over there.
Just so we're on the same page, Mr. McCauley's a new member of the committee, but he has served on many committees in the past. Let's allow, Mr. Chair, witnesses to complete their sentences. Let's not interrupt them after they've spoken two or three words. Just
Now,
as a courtesy.
I can address it, Mr. McCauley. So, I think, Mr. Fragas, I give latitude to members to use their time as they see fit. Should a member want to come back to a question that they feel another member has not permitted a witness to give time to, they're free to do that. But the time is limited here, and in particular, some members only have 2.5 minutes, and I think members do have the ability and the right to end a question if they think it's going down a path they do not think is helpful. Having said that, I take your point that we do want to show courtesy to our witnesses, and if questions are asked, witnesses should be given the chance to at least provide a brief retort. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mr. McCauley. Don't argue with me because the time is now running, so you're eating into your time.
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. How long has this been on CRA's radar? How many years?
I can't speak to how long it's been on the radar totally. It's been on the radar ever since I became the commissioner 6 years ago. Okay. And I know that it was on before that.
Okay. Can I interrupt? I'm just going to ask ESDC the same question. How long has it been on ESDC's radar?
This is a constant source of work for us because it's a population that's hard to reach. So each year, year over year, and certainly since 2016, we've been working on addressing this issue across the spectrum of vulnerable populations across the country.
The reason I ask this question is, okay, if we've been aware of it for 6 years now, does the AG's recommendations set the way on how to address this? Or is this going to be just a step forward to one small step in a long process to addressing this? And why is it taking so long? Start with CRA, please.
Sure. And this one might need more than 15 seconds, but it won't take more than a minute and a half. It's not new. It's an evolving challenge. It's one that we've spent a lot of time thinking about. And what I was going to say was, if you read the Auditor General's report, I think one thing that we all agree on is a challenging area to reach those that are hard to reach. There has been lots of work that's been done, but there's more that's left to be done. There are improvements that have to be made to overcome some of the challenges that we have reaching these people, amassing data, to be able to measure our results. So I think the Auditor General's report points to some things that are positive developments, but it will be a continuing journey.
Do you believe the Auditor General is correct when he says that the outreach We don't know if it actually helped, and that perhaps the department's overstated how much their outreach worked, which is a pretty concerning comment if the government's overstating.
Well, I think we... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Sure, and I'll just carry on. If you want to hear from the other witnesses, just let me know. But I think we always try to be clear with what we are measuring. And I think as the Auditor General referenced, we measure take-up based on how many people have filed. Where we have difficulty measuring is those people that haven't filed. And so that's part of the work that we're doing together with Stats Canada ESDC to see if we can overcome those.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to interrupt you. Just quickly to the AG, please. Your comment is the department's overstated the results. Do you think your recommendations as you've presented to them are clear enough for them to end overstating their results?
I believe that the other witness was accurate. It's about the take-up rate. So we have an exhibit that tells you that, there's been an increase in the child benefit take-up rate to 97%, but that doesn't talk about those individuals who have not filed a tax return. So that's where you're overstating your take-up rate. It's 97% of those eligible who have filed. So you need to be able to think about those who haven't.
Thank you very much.
Who won't or who can't.
Thank you very much. Turning on to Mr. Fragascatos, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all witnesses for being here today. Commissioner Hamilton, I wanted to begin with you. You spoke about community volunteer income tax programs, or CVITPs, as a key example of how the challenge of hard-to-reach populations are accessed, if I can put it that way. Could you expand on that, and could you also give more information to the committee about something else you talked about, which was the recent enhancements to the program that were announced by our Minister of National Revenue, Minister Le Boutillier, pertaining to populations in the north and Indigenous individuals as well.
Thank you. Yes, I would start by just saying the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program is a very important one that we've worked quite aggressively on over the last number of years. And at the core of it, it's really an effort by us to try to reach some of these people who we might not normally be able to reach. How do you do that? How do you encourage them to file a tax return so that they could get the benefits that they're eligible for? Because the laws of the land say you can't get them unless you file. So this is our effort to get into the community, build the trust that we can with some of the community members, and have some volunteers help people file their tax returns and get benefits that they need. So it's been something that we've had for a while now, and we've been trying to improve it over time. As I noted, during the pandemic, we had to pivot a little bit to go more to a virtual format because these were predominantly in person, and we couldn't do that at the beginning of the pandemic. So we did pivot, and we have great support from the communities that we're engaged with. And what we did recently that was in the announcement was we have provided some grants to these community associations to help defray some of the costs that they have to incur when they're providing this support. It could be something like paper, computers, that sort of thing. So as they're trying to help the members of their community in these hard-to-reach areas, we have a program that allows us to compensate them for some of those expenses. And Minister Le Boutillier announced recently some changes to that to make it more effective, provide greater assistance, and target it better to some communities across the land, including Indigenous community. So it's a way for us to get into the communities and try to help the people within that community with the support of others.
Thank you very much. And I've seen the work of CVITPs up close in a number of different parts of the country. I can tell you specifically about my home riding in London, where we have a number of CVITPs that have helped individuals gain access to things like the Canada Child Benefit, which, as you know, if that isn't filed for a number of years especially, finally getting access to it is transformational for families and obviously for kids. Would you say, because this is something that I've noticed about CVITPs, Commissioner, that the trust relationship is fundamental? These are usually locally based organizations that do a number of other things. They're not-for-profits or charities, but they're known in their communities and therefore have established trust between citizens and there's a relationship of trust that exists towards citizens and vice versa. Would you say that that is fundamental to CVITPs and how potentially they can be a key actor in confronting this challenge of hard-to-reach populations?
I think it's absolutely a key. The trust that the people of the community, the hard-to-reach populations have in government is really important, or in a community organization. So in the CVITP, they really help us to get that trust to allow us to help them. I think the trust, though, goes beyond the CVITP as well. It goes into every effort that we make to reach out to communities, be they Indigenous or elsewhere. Some people don't like to see the CRA coming, and we have to make sure that we go out of our way to say we are here to help you get access to the benefits that you're entitled to. And how do they trust us? And sometimes that trust takes some time to build. And community volunteers certainly help us in that regard.
I also wanted to ask you, Commissioner, about beyond CVITPs. Specifically, and as you know, the Minister for National Revenue has, as part of her mandate letter, reaching out and tasking not just her, the Prime Minister has tasked also the CRA to reach out and find ways to engage newcomers and youth. What is the CRA doing beyond CVITPs to engage with those?
Again, a very active program for us to try to raise awareness of the tax system and the benefits that one can get through the tax system. So we've got really a three-pillar approach. We are looking at improving financial and tax literacy through educational efforts that we provide. Second, raising that awareness that I spoke about, that people recognize that filing your tax system is an important key to enable some of the benefits to come through, and then supporting the filing. Helping people who might be challenged in terms of filing their tax return. We can provide the support. We just talked about the CVITP, but a lot of what we're doing is making it easier for people to access the tax system. And that can be some things such as videos that we prepare, sometimes in very different languages to help the newcomers. You mentioned newcomers coming to the country. How can they get a familiarity with the tax system? And we have educational materials, and in some cases we're able to translate it into languages that are easier for them to access. So those are some of the things that we're doing in that area, just to try to, again, increase awareness and help people, make it simpler for them to file their taxes and understand the tax system.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Turning now to la députée Sinclair.
Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés, you have 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the witnesses for their speeches and those who came in person. Of course, protecting vulnerable populations is the #1 priority of any good government. It's the intrinsic role of a government, that is, to protect those who really need it. First of all, we have to know who they are, have to identify them and differentiate them, because we've talked about different populations here who work differently, who live differently, and who will certainly need different incentives. What I'd like to understand first and foremost is to what extent we are familiar with these vulnerable populations who did not respond or who do not have access to resources right now. To what extent can we identify them, collect data about them, and then try to reach them? I'd like to put that question either to Revenue Canada or the ESDC.
Start off. Bonjour tout le monde.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the question.
Looked at the traditional ways that we've been trying to reach people to deliver benefits, and then deconstructing that to make a determination of how do we actually find those people that are accessing our benefits, because they're not using our traditional methods. They're not calling us. They're not coming into Service Canada centers. They're not in any databases. They're not filing taxes. So what we're looking at and what we've been doing for the past few years is using resources, third-party resources, NGOs, advocacies, help groups that are on the ground who are actually accessing these people and using them as an example, an intermediary to connect with us so that we can connect them to services. But we're also using outreach services across the country, not just in rural northern areas, but also in urban centers, because this is an issue regardless of geography.
Bien sûr.
Or where people are living.
Bien sûr, merci pour votre réponse.
Thank you for your reply. I'd like to follow up on that. Can we estimate how many people we can't reach, knowing that people who didn't file taxes are not included in the objectives? And that 100% doesn't include the whole population that needs it. Do we know how many vulnerable people are not included? Do we know how many don't file taxes, for instance? Do we have a figure for that?
Ça, c'est encore pour... Non, allez-y, s'il vous plaît.
Go ahead, please. That's one of the challenges, to get some kind of statistics on the overall population. We have good statistics on people who have filed taxes, but what's the additional number? I don't have a good estimate of that number of people, but as Laurie said, we are constantly trying to find ways to estimate that. With Statistics Canada, we can do estimates for Aboriginal people, for instance, but perhaps one of my colleagues has a better estimate than I do. But I don't think so. It's very difficult to estimate. If we can't do it today, I'll go back to the agency and try to make sure we didn't get that. Yes, that would be well appreciated. Thank you, sir.
What I would comment, Commissioner Hamilton is absolutely correct in that it's very challenging to have with any degree of certainty to identify how many individuals are not filing. But I'd just like to highlight two things that we've been doing for over 5 years now. For a number of years, we've been working with Statistics Canada to conduct what we call linkage studies, where we actually can discreetly link up citizens that complete their census with tax data. It's anonymized, of course, so that gives us an idea as far as individuals who aren't availing themselves of benefits and credits. And for the past 5 years in the Canada Revenue Agency, we've been conducting what we call a non-filer benefit outreach program, where we are in touch with individuals who, according to our records, our holdings, didn't file a return, but for whom, according to our data, they would be entitled to a benefit or a credit. They would not be in a situation where they'd owe taxes, but they're entitled to benefits.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your answer. That's very interesting. So for how long, I think, Ms. Pranke, you could answer that. How long have you been conducting that study of any linkage with Statistics Canada?
Mr. Chair, we've been conducting this study we're in the process of conducting it a second time with Statistics Canada based on the 2001 census. But this benefit outreach program that I've referred to, it's been going on for 5 years, and we've issued over 1.3 million letters to citizens, which has resulted in over $80 million in refunds being generated, $86 million in Canada Child Benefit payments being issued, pardon me. It's resulted in $40 million in refunds, almost $16 million in CCB payments, and just over $17 million in GST payments. So it's an important program. And one last item I'd like to mention.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off there. I wanted to hear all those numbers, but thank you very much. Turning now to MP Desjardins. You have the floor for 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the Auditor General and her office for being present here today. I want to thank the witnesses as well who've been able to enlighten us on some of the realities facing hard-to-reach populations. I understand how difficult this work is in light of the lack of data, and I think I want to focus there. But I do want to make a positive mention about the efforts that have been undertaken, particularly in reserves. I have had an opportunity to speak with some communities about some of the supports that they've received in allowing for intake, so I think that's a good portion of this. However, I think the gaps that are present in that framework are really obvious to many folks, particularly in urban settings. And so when I talk about urban settings, it seems strange to think about people being unable to access services in urban settings, but what we're seeing with a growing number of folks struggling in urban centers, and on top of that, we're seeing places like Service Canada in my city of Edmonton that hasn't been open in almost 2 years. It's a concern for populations. There's 3,400 houseless folks in my community, 3,400 in Edmonton, Griesba. 462 died in the last 2 years. And so when I think about hard-to-reach populations, I think about these people in my community who are unable to access these services. And so when I think about the work that is being undertaken, in particular relation to recommendation by the Auditor General's Office 1.59 to improve the integration and effectiveness of targeted outreach, I think about those populations, my relatives in Edmonton, Griesba, who are living in this reality right now. I see there was work related to several departments, including Employment and Social Development Canada, Indigenous Services Canada, that looked at uptake for rural and reserve settings. Is there any comparable work that's taken place to ensure that Indigenous urban populations, which make up the majority of Indigenous people in Canada today, had a comparable level of service or an application to actually help overcome these barriers? Was there any working group in urban settings for Indigenous folks? And I'll ask both Indigenous Services Canada, the member from ESDC, the Assistant Deputy Minister.
Thanks very much. So a couple of things. Just for clarity, all Service Canada centres are open across the country and in Edmonton, and we're in the process of finalising returning to all of our outreach centres where people are still looking for us to join them. So certainly we are present and available in urban centres for accessing services. And we have actually been tracking a number of our benefit delivery pieces. I know your question is specific to urban centres, but I just want to give you a couple of statistics. So in our Indigenous community, we did do a significant amount of work on OAS and CPP take-up rates between 2016 and 20, or with respect to the earlier question about, how long have we been working on this? So OAS between 2016 and 2020, we saw an increase of...
Sorry, I have to apologize, Assistant Deputy Minister. The member will likely bring that question up again about the timing, and so we'll reserve that perhaps for him. I really do need an answer related to urban population consultation or support. Has it happened?
So yes, we do consultation and outreach in urban centers very frequently across the country, not just in Edmonton, but in other major centers. And we also do it with CRA and Indigenous Services Canada. We actually have working groups that work together. We also do it with provincial and territorial colleagues as well as part of our outreach services across the country.
Thank you very much for that. So when we're talking about, for example, the recommendation met in 1.59 to the Auditor General, when looking at that recommendation and looking at ways to actually integrate better services for this population, are you satisfied when you're reviewing this information? Was there any evidence that there was a working group that was similar or an equivalent to that working group within urban centers specific for urban Indigenous people?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Not for specific.
Sorry, this is for the Auditor General's Office.
Thank you.
No, we did not see that statistic, and we were encouraging both the Canada Revenue Agency and ESTC to actually delve into more disaggregated data, because I acknowledge that it's difficult to measure uptake when you're looking at the entire population. So, by definition, these people are hard to reach. So you actually need to go into the granularity to understand the individual barriers for different types of subgroups within hard-to-reach populations in order to actually target your outreach. And that's what the recommendation was addressed at, was getting to that, the real crux of the matter. What is the barrier for that individual group? Because the majority of people are being served by normal outreach activities.
How much time, Chair?
About a minute, just under a minute. Say
Okay, well,
45
I'll
seconds.
leave my second question. So just in relation to, I'll try to wrap this one up real quick. The 1.58, so back to the Assistant Deputy Minister. Hearing your words that you seem to be satisfied in some ways with the level of consultation in urban centers, I've demonstrated in my own testimony just now that that's not the case for many folks. The Auditor General's highlighted the lack of work there. Is your department, I've seen that they agreed to this point. What plans do you have to establish a working group to ensure, especially with Indigenous Services Canada, to tackle the challenges and understand the challenges of urban Indigenous community members?
And if you could keep your answer as focused as possible, please.
So for clarity, we're never satisfied. We're always working to improve those services. We do outreach to communities across the country, and we're very motivated by the Auditor General's recommendation. We agree with it wholeheartedly, and that's part of our action plan going forward, is to put more precise working groups together to tackle those hard to find areas.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder to members to avoid kind of banter, and particularly banter across the aisle. I gave Mr. Desjardins a little more time there because of that, and I'm looking more at my Conservative colleagues on this than the government side. Thank you. Turning to our second round, Mr. Genuis, you have 5 minutes for questioning. Oh, Mr. Cram, pardon me. You have 5 minutes for questioning, Mr. Cram. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today, and thank you for all of your work on this very important matter. I would like to start with Mr. Hamilton from the CRA. So we've heard a couple of times now about the importance of getting people to file their income tax in the first place, because if they don't file their income tax, we don't know that they're out there, and we don't know how to help them. So, Mr. Hamilton, can you give us a breakdown about how Canadians file their income tax these days? Is it mostly online? Is it mostly driving down to H&R Block? Is it mailing in the paper forms? How does it happen?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a mix, certainly, and we do try to tailor our services so that people can use the channel of their choice. But predominantly, over 90% of tax returns are filed electronically. Based on last year, I forget the exact number, but say 92%, something like that. If you're looking at individuals, a large portion of them, over 50%, go to tax preparers. Others would use software that's available in the market. And then the balance, we have a File My Return, which is particularly helpful for this group, where you can file by phone, and we're expanding that. And then 1 million or so people use paper forms, and we mail the forms out to them to make it easier. So that's how people file their tax returns. And I think one of the focal points, my final point, is we're just trying to make that process as easy as possible for people. It's obviously better for us if it's filed electronically from a system perspective, but we're trying to make sure that we're accommodating how people want to file their return.
90 to 92% for the general population. Is it a similar figure for these hard-to-reach populations, or have you noticed an uptick in different ways among these hard-to-reach populations?
I don't have a specific figure on what it is for the hard-to-reach populations. Now, we would be talking about people that are hard to reach, but they still file, I think, is the premise of your question. There'd be another bunch of people that are hard to reach that we haven't been able to get access to then. But probably less of a percentage would be in electronic, but unless Jillian has a specific statistic, I'd have to get back to you with the breakdown that we have.
Are we waiting for Jillian, or? Oh, okay, I'll just take it from there then. Yes, if you could provide a written submission specific to some of the outreach that you've done and how that wound up getting submitted after your outreach activities, I think that would be helpful. I mean, if the people that we are doing outreach to don't have high-speed internet access or what have you, that may be worth considering. So I guess I'll follow up. Do you see any role for tax code simplification or tax form simplification that could just make it easier for the forms to get filled out and submitted so that we can get them in the door in the first place, so to speak?
Mr. Chair, that certainly part of our effort is to simplify the process as much as we can so that the person filling it out faces a simple task. And we have ways of doing that. I think the community volunteer is an example where people can go out and actually help you file it. We had the File My Return, which if you're in a relatively simple tax situation, you can do it by phone. We have a simplified return for Indigenous communities, and that would be both rural and urban, as we go back to the previous question. So we are doing the best that we can, and the system works better when it's as simple as possible to navigate. And I think that's where another one of the Auditor General's recommendations rings true. How can we, together with the SDC, work together to streamline the process for people overall, for all governments? And how can we work with provinces? We have these things called super clinics because the federal government isn't the only one that provides benefits in this space. How can we consolidate our efforts, if you like, to make it simpler for people? But, you know, I think the premise of your question, is the tax system a simple thing? No. And we're doing everything we can to try to make it simple for the people that are trying to use it.
20 seconds, including an answer.
Really quickly, could you provide some advice for politicians to make the tax code simpler?
Okay, that's
not in this forum. I
short
can't.
answer.
Fair enough. And Mr. Chair, I see I'm just about out of time. So.
You could use your next time to suggest a tax form. You'll have a whole 5 minutes. Turning now to Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today. The overwhelming theme and recurring theme here is we don't know what we don't know. That's the whole problem. We've got these invisible, potential people we could help, but they're under the radar. I was working in a municipality at the time that this happened, and I know when they collapsed the long-form census form, it was really a struggle for municipalities to help identify some of the service needs because we just didn't have the data. I was wondering, Ms. McDonald, can you tell me, was that impactful on your department when we dropped the collection of that more extensive data through the long-form census form? Did that kind of, limit the kind of information you had access to?
Well, we do have an umbrella MOU agreement in place with Stats Canada, and we do share and gather information back and forth from them. So I can't specifically say that in and of itself had a very specific impact on us, but what I can say is that as reflected in the AG's report, it's really important that we share data with Stats Canada and they share data with us so we can actually get at these hard to find populations.
So following up on that, I suppose this is a question then for the Canada Revenue Agency. I know that in the opening statement they indicated there is a lot of information, of course, that is personal and identifiable, so they can't share that. So in response to recommendation 1.45 on understanding the effectiveness of outreach approaches, the agency responded that it does not currently collect personal data of those individuals who participate in outreach events. Is it possible for the Canada Revenue Agency to collect certain demographic data confidentially that would enable it to better access the effectiveness of its awareness strategy without violating the Privacy Act? Is that possible?
Mr. Chair, in response to that question, this is one of the trade-offs that we always face as we try to collect information to help us guide future actions. We face privacy laws, as does every other organization. And we also have within the Income Tax Act a Section 241, which declares the confidentiality of information that we receive. So we are not able at the moment, now we'll see how times evolve, to collect that information on, for example, the people that get helped by the CVITP. So we can track the effort, how many volunteers there are, how many people came in, but we can't collect that information and use it. So that's part of what we're looking at together with StatsCan and ESDC. Are there some things that we can do to better enable us to have the information that would be helpful without breaching our privacy or confidentiality under the Income Tax Act? So it's an area of continuing work.
programs that seems to be greatly underutilized is the Canada Learning Bond, and it's such a shame. Like in 2020, only 42% of children under age 21 who were already eligible actually used it. So there was an RESP open in their name, and the federal government had deposited money into it, but it wasn't being utilized. And this is free money from the government, and so. Do you have any idea what explains the low take-up rate for the Canada Learning Bond, Ms. McDonald?
Yes, for sure. I'll actually ask my colleague Kraman to respond to this question.
Thank you, Deputy, and thank you, Chair. The explanation is actually, I think a member already mentioned that the families need to open and registered education savings plan in order to receive Canada Learning Bond. So the program design, it's part of a savings incentive scheme. And so families need to go to a financial institution, have to open an account, and then apply for open an account, open an RESP, and then open for Canada Learning Bond. That administrative complexity adds to the reason for low uptake. We have been trying our best, and you are right, the uptake rate has slightly increased over time. But at this point, given everything that we have done, I think there is a ceiling beyond which we may not be able to reach, given the administrative complexity of how to apply for the benefit.
I was just wondering if it couldn't be done more automatically like we were doing with the OAS, where at age 65, the OAS was just automatically happening. Could these accounts not be just opened when newborns happen? Because the government will pay $500 for the first year and $100 in subsequent years. So even if the parents in some of these hard-to-reach areas were unable financially to contribute anything further, at least they'd have that. So if there was an automatic process, like when you apply for a birth certificate or whatever, boom, there's your account. It might be something you could maybe...
very, very brief answer if you have one.
Yes, the legislation currently does not allow that, but this is one of the things that the department continues to look into.
Thank you very, very much. Et maintenant, c'est Madame Sinclair.
Now, Ms. Sinclair Degagné, you have 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to continue in the same vein that we'd started a few minutes ago, particularly about data collection done jointly between the CRA, Employment and Social Development Canada, and Statistics Canada. I'd like an answer, and I don't know who can answer it. It's a simple one. How does Canada's privacy law compare to that of other countries that do similar censuses as Canada does?
Est-ce que quelqu'un peut répondre à...
Can somebody answer that question? It's a simple question, but it's not very simple. I would ask Max Guinette to answer, please, to whatever extent is possible. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. Thank you for the question. It's quite a broad question, actually. I'd say that Europe is a little more aggressive than Canada. In Canada, however, we try to match the regulations we see in Europe to some extent. And there are principles that limit the use of data to the reasons for which they were collected. That's the kind of challenge we face right now. There is data that was collected for a specific reason but cannot be used by another department for another reason. Fine, thank you. Now, a follow-up to that question. Could more flexible legislation lead to an improvement in the results when it comes to access by vulnerable people? Mr. Chairman, in answer to that question, of course, more flexible legislation might lead to greater use of this data by various organizations for different purposes, but maybe that would go against the principles of protecting private information, which are inherent in the laws we have in Canada. So just one sentence, if you'll allow me. Overall, there's arbitration needed between protecting private data and putting an end to poverty. That's what I understand here. Thank you very much.
For 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to continue on the vein of Ms. Bradford related to the Canada Learning Bond. And so the Canada Learning Bond, we have some information here related to really deplorable intake rates for that program. And as Ms. Bradford actually had mentioned, it's seemingly a good project for a lot of folks, but there seems to be such little intake. And so I know she had asked about why the reasons are there, but I want to get a little bit more specific on that question in relation to the nature of the folks who are accessing the program. And so I'm guessing largely the advice of the folks who are accessing this program are accessing it by way of financial institutions. I'm not certain if a member maybe at the CRA or ESDC can mention what is the typical access point for this benefit.
So if I could jump in, Deputy. Yes, yes, a financial institution has to be an access point. Families who want to apply for Canada Learning Bond has to open an RESP, which can only be opened with a financial institution. So that has to be an access point. For the families who have difficulty doing that, we have about 350 community organizations that we work with to help them open RESP accounts with financial institutions. Sometimes we hold events bringing in our partners from CRA, from financial institutions, from provincial governments to help them open an account. Sometimes actually on the spot applying for a social insurance number, and Service Canada will provide a social insurance number on the spot. There would be members of the financial institution helping them open an account to facilitate that. But it is true that the access point needs to be a financial institution for RESP.
Thank you very much for that very clear and concise answer. And from members of this committee, including myself, I think one of the most important facts around financial institution access as the access point is knowing that there isn't an alternative, right? So that's an issue present in a massive barrier to folks who actually want to access this public program. They'd have to go to another institution like a financial institution to get that. So I think that's in some ways a barrier that I can just immediately see here in relation to these numbers. And it's just to the Auditor General, was that something that you folks looked into?
I am afraid you're out of time, but you will have another
time.
round, yes. Mr. Genuis, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
For 2 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor for me to be joining the Public Accounts Committee. I grew up during the period of the sponsorship scandal, so the Auditor General was, in my mind, always a celebrity. So I know I'm among great people here. I dug into this audit as my sort of first one at this committee, and I was very struck by what was in it. It's a study into the ability of the government to get benefits to people who may not be aware of those benefits, may struggle to apply for them, and so forth. And the conclusion that I got from it was, well, we don't really know. We can't really measure. And the government has spent a bunch of money in this area, but we can't really figure out if it's working, which seemed pretty disappointing and borderline scandalous that we recognize that there's this problem, but the government's efforts to address it are not being measured. We have no sense of whether we're progressing towards that objective. Ms. Hogan, am I sort of correct in my summary of this? Am I missing something? Those were my kind of takeaways from the information you provided, just about the lack of measurable results from the government in terms of this money they're spending on trying to do outreach here.
I think you used different words than the words we used in our report, but the sentiment is there, absolutely. I guess I would call it as, the typical recipe reaches the majority of people. And so now if the goal is to try and reach those that are on the edges or those that are harder to reach, reluctant to interact with the government, may not be aware, it's a time to try a different recipe or think differently or act differently, right? And that's what we are hoping to highlight here, is that need to really try and do things differently.
Right, and the very purpose of government benefits should be to reach those that are on the edge, those that are most vulnerable, those that are on the margins, right? So it's a particular problem if we're saying those that are perhaps in greatest need of benefits and government supports may not be accessing them very much because of that that marginalization. I guess another thing that struck me about this whole discussion was the focus from the government seems to be, well, we need to spend more money going out and talking to people about these benefits, but not the discussion of maybe we need to simplify the structure of these benefits. Maybe we need to make more benefits automatic. Maybe we need to look at things like automatic tax filing that exists in other countries. Maybe I'll direct my questions to the folks at the CRA. My next question to the folks at the CRA. What concrete steps are you taking to try to improve the simplicity of benefits that are available, make this automatic? It seems to me, I guess, that the trend of government policy is to make things more complex, to say we're going to have an additional benefit for this, an additional benefit for that, an additional benefit for that, rather than talking about large, simpler benefits that are targeted to vulnerable people that they have more flexibility around.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to respond to that. I think I mentioned that we are trying to make things simpler for people. I'll give you a couple of examples of things that we have done, and it feeds into your automating principle. For the child benefit, we do have an automatic benefit application where we can automatically enroll someone in at the time of birth, and that's been very effective. We also, for the Canada Workers Benefit, brought a number of people in to be eligible for that automatically. So we are trying to use that automation where we can, but in other cases, we've used different routes to try to simplify things for people. We have provided a form for Indigenous communities.
Sorry, can I just clarify? Can I just clarify my question, though? I mean, some of these things are now becoming automatic for those who file. But some countries have worked to create mechanisms of where filing is automatic.
30 seconds.
Can you talk about any measures under consideration to follow, for instance, the British model in making that filing automatic, reducing the paper burden for everybody, but also making these benefits easier to access?
We do have the autofill feature, which will fill in your tax form for you with information that we have. The issue that you run into is that for a lot of people, there's a number of discretionary elements in the tax system, and it's hard for us to fill it in, or we don't have the information. But where we have it, we do have a process for auto-filling certain elements on your tax form.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dennis. I'm afraid you are out of time, but there'll be another round for your side. Going down to Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I thank the witnesses for being here with us today in person and on screen. This is a topic that is very close to my heart. I remember being part of advocacy groups back in the early 2000s around the whole issue of old age security, finding out that thousands, if not tens of thousands of people were not getting their OAS because they weren't aware of how to apply for it and so on and so forth. So very glad to see that is an auto-enrollment since 2014. And in my work too, as a social worker in financial autonomy, finding out that behavioral economics, a term that we've heard here today, and let's just say a reluctance to engage with the tax system is very much a reality, and which is why I'm very heartened to hear that the community groups are playing a large part in working with the CRA and ESDC in reaching out to folks. A question now for both of the witnesses from those agencies. do the department and agency have estimates of the take-up rates for benefits such as the Guaranteed Income Supplement, the Canada Child Benefit, and the Canada Workers Benefit, and the Canada Learning Bond in various vulnerable populations, such as Indigenous people and people with disabilities, and can it provide those estimates to the committee in writing? I'm asking the question to, I think it's Commissioner Hamilton and or Madam McDonald.
Sure, I can jump in first and say we'd be happy to provide whatever statistics we have with relation to uptake in terms of our OAS and our GIS programs. We do track uptake. Again, the difficulty is that we don't know what we don't know, to the point made earlier in terms of who's not accessing, but we can certainly give some statistics around our auto enrollment and so on.
Understand that this would be statistics, rates that you would have for people that have completed their income tax returns. But we have heard also from Statistics Canada that there is a way of estimating using linked data sets and a way of estimating the take-up rates for people who do not file tax returns. Is it possible to get an estimate of those numbers regarding the programs that I mentioned earlier, GIS and the Canada Child Benefit? So
we could take a look at that and see what we can provide to you for sure.
Excellent. And
I would, sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I would just echo that. And I think Laurie set out that we don't know what we don't know, but we did do some work with Statistics Canada and ESDC to try to use that statistical method to estimate take-up rates on Indigenous communities for child benefit. I don't have the numbers at the top of my at my fingertips, but we can endeavor to get you something in writing after the meeting.
Statistics Canada, we're seeing some very innovative ways of learning about hard-to-reach populations. For example, the street count that happens in a lot of Canadian cities regarding homeless population. There was one in Montreal just a few weeks ago using trained volunteers. Is this something that is helpful in your work?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. Statistics Canada has a large number of surveys that are designed to report on the quality of life of Canadians. You know, we use different kinds of statistical methods to measure those indicators. We also have some initiatives in terms of disaggregation of data. There's always a challenge in terms of disaggregation of data in terms of respecting confidentiality and privacy of our respondents. You can think of efforts to go to the lowest geography level that is possible, or really to collect additional information from various population groups. We've been working with partners, because it's part of our mandate to ensure that we provide data and insights that are relevant to our partners and to inform them on the policy work that they do. So I will conclude here. Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. That concludes the time. Turning now to our next round, we're going back to Mr. McCauley. You have the floor for 5 minutes, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to follow up and add on perhaps Ms. Shanahan's request. And I may have missed it, but are you able to provide, CRA, provide us with the percentage of what we term as vulnerable who are completing their tax returns? And can you provide to the committee a breakdown of the amount of numbers by vulnerable, whether it's we consider vulnerable as in refugee, First Nation, or Indigenous, and broken down by that if you're able to. So the CRA, we're talking about this has been kind of a work in progress for 6 years. I'm looking at your departmental plan for this year, and it doesn't actually mention this issue of the vulnerable. It talks about Canadians worker benefit, ensure Canadians who qualify, but it's not on your departmental plans, but it's apparently has been on the radar for 6 years. Is that just kind of an oversight or just not enough space in your departmental plan to note this?
I would have to go back and review the departmental plan, the corporate business plan. I think you're referring to, Mr. Chair. But it certainly has
Your
been a
department,
priority.
CRA departmental plan, not a corporate plan, your departmental plan. But that's fine. You know what? And just a question to you. We talked about it's kind of a continual work in progress, almost moving targets with this. And I understand, you know, we hear from StatsCan it's difficult to identify sometimes. Is that, do we believe that we'll ever get to our goal, or will it just, the targets, the goalposts keep moving on us? Like, do you believe the recommendations put forward by the AG will get this settled satisfactory, or will just improve how we're doing it?
Mr. Chair, in response to that question, I think we're going to continually be working on this. The nature of the challenge is such that we will make progress towards it. And maybe to an earlier question said we don't know where we're going, we don't know how we're doing. We are making progress. We can see it through the CVITP programs. Okay. It's true what the Auditor General says, that we need to do a better job of measuring and coordinate our efforts. But yes, I believe we're going to continue to see progress. But I think by the nature of the issue, we will always have more to do.
No, I understand. Sharing of information, have we approached the provinces for sharing the information? Like, I think of Alberta, they are the ones who are delivering by far most of the services to the vulnerable, whether it's through the AISH program or other programs. I realize there's privacy issues, this and that, but are we using the provinces' information that they have?
I'll maybe start on that, and I'll turn it over to Max, who looks after that area. But definitely working with the provinces and bringing them in together with the SDC, because they are players in delivering benefits.
But we have been, or we're going to? We have been?
We have been, but okay, at that stage, I'll turn it over to Max, and he can describe some of what we are doing.
Just real brief, because I have another question for you, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have been in so far as we do manage some tax information for the provinces, and there's a number of tax information sharing agreements with provinces. So that
but are we using that tax information to identify the vulnerable to deliver services is what I'm after? Like, are we proactively going to Alberta and saying, here's our list of, you know, provide our list of who's on AISH, the support system, so we can match up to see if they're getting benefits. And that's oversimplifying it, but are we proactively approaching the provinces, seeing as they are the ones who deliver most of the services to the vulnerable?
There are inherent exchanges of that type of information that you described as part of the work that we do with provinces.
Right. And final question, because I've got 1 minute. I notice there's, you know, a recommendation to work together between StatsCan, CRA, and ESDC. We've seen repeatedly through other departments, when you don't have a lead department, it becomes 3 or 2 or 4 departments pointing at each other when it comes to accountability. Who is the lead agency? Who's the lead department on this, so we actually have accountability and someone pushing this, as opposed to, well, ESDC's not here today, can't answer for you?
I'll maybe take a stab at that.
You can't run things by committee is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just to respond, I think it truly is a joint effort between us and ESDC. There are certain programs that ESDC is responsible for. You mentioned OAS, GIS, certain that we are, but we share the same challenge. And I don't think that's a problem, that we have to do it in a partnership. We both feel accountable to this. And to your point on the departmental plan, this has been in the minister's priority mandate letter for years, and it is a priority for us to make efforts to get access to benefits for youth, newcomers, vulnerable Canadians. So it's there as a priority.
Thank you very much. Just, Mr. McCauley, you'd asked for some information. I just wanted to make sure that you got a response about that. Can you just, that was to the CRA, was it?
Yes, to the CRA.
Yes, and I just want to make sure the CRA heard that request from Mr. McCauley for some information, and that was acknowledged.
Yes, we will come back.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, appreciate it. I just want to double check.
Yeah, just I will want to check the text of it, whether it was looking for information on people who have filed their return or not. And maybe, Mr. Chair, if I could just point to, because a previous question was Have we done any work with Indigenous communities in StatsCan on the take-up
I'm going to
rate?
stop you there. We still have no. Not that we're not interested, and I know there's several members who will be, but I'm going to leave the questionings to the members. But I do appreciate your enthusiasm. Should you feel that there's more to be said that you don't get a chance to, please send it off to the committee. But I need to be careful that I don't abuse my time and take away from the members' times. Turning now to Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Hamilton, would you like to finish your point briefly?
Okay, Mr. Chair,
Thank
it
you.
is very quick. It's just to say that I said we would get back with some estimates from the work we did with StatsCan. It's actually in the Auditor General's report. I was just looking at it here. We looked at the take-up rate in Indigenous communities, referenced that it was lower than the population in general, 79% versus 97%. But the point was made that it used old census data, and that's what we're doing now is updating some of that work to use new census data. So I just wanted to, it was just
Okay.
for the committee members.
No. Thank you, Ms. Yip. I've reset your clock as well, so thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. This question is directed to Madame Bégin. In your opening statement, you said that through data integration of administrative data with other data holdings of StatsCan, you can describe the number of recipients belonging to a particular age, sex, racialized, Indigenous identity, or another population at-risk group. In my riding of Scarborough Agincourt, and I'm sure many ridings around the country, there's large immigrant populations whose first language is neither English nor French. And I know that this population is definitely hard to reach because of the language barriers and other factors that make it more difficult for them to engage in things like filing taxes or filling out census forms. And not all of these people are newcomers. Do you have a special way to identify people in this particular at-risk group?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Depending on the objective of the study or the research that we would do, one source for us would be to look at the census data, which collect lots of information around language spoken at home. So again, depending on the objective, then an integration of data, then we could derive maybe at-risk population. So that's one example. I do want to say that we collect a lot of a large number of surveys. We also have access to administrative data, whether it's from ESDC, CRA, or the provinces and the territories. And we do, on a regular basis, we do integration of data because it's the power of data is there when you combine it. And we do that respecting confidentiality and privacy of the information. We also do that through a secure environment, and we use different statistical methods to combine the information.
Research advisory group been helpful on this front?
Mr. Chair, can the question be repeated because I missed the beginning of the question?
Has the work of the Tax Research Advisory Group been helpful on this front?
So as I said in my opening remarks, the Tax Research Advisory Group has been very helpful, and we have looked at various initiatives so far. So it's been a very active group, and I am very confident that we will be able to support ESDC and CRA with this Tax Research Advisory Group.
Next question is directed to Ms. McDonald, and it's similar to the question that I just asked Madame Bégin. Have you had any success identifying and targeting outreach to people, as I mentioned, immigrants whose first language is neither English nor French, and have other barriers such as digital literacy or distrust of government?
Absolutely, for sure. We're actually working very closely with IRCC right now, working with them on their newcomer programs as an example to meet with individuals, newcomers, as soon as they come to Canada, so we can attach them to things like social insurance numbers, which essentially a newcomer needs to access any kind of services or benefits. So we're doing work with IRCC, but we also use outreach groups as well. We actually go out, we have hundreds of partners in the community. We hold super clinics as an example to support, because we don't know where these individuals are. So we actually use groups that they gravitate towards as a way to pivot to them, to go to them versus waiting for them to come to us to help in terms of being able to connect them to services. We also work with provinces and territories as well, to the question earlier, to help them sharing information and data with respect to newcomers coming to Canada and people who have been in Canada for a while but never been able to access services.
That really is all the time, Miss Yep. So, sorry.
Now, Ms. Sinclair-Gagné, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a series of questions for the Auditor General. If we read your report, and I'm quoting you here, you say that overall you observed that the CRA and ESDC had not done enough to help hard-to-reach populations. Moreover, you say that you observed that no tangible progress had been achieved when it comes to the collection, measurement, or analysis of the use of these benefits. Moreover, we know that Canada has an objective to reduce poverty by 50% by 2030. Do you think that the government is doing enough in its poverty reduction efforts? Well, we looked at 4 benefits that seek to reduce poverty. As I mentioned, the regular process reaches a lot of people, but if we really want to try to find those who are hard to reach, we have to change the approach. We have to target this approach and tackle the obstacles that lie in the way of those who are hard to reach. Okay, so in brief, will the government be able to reduce poverty by 2030 as its objectives state? That's a big question. I know that the Environment Commissioner said he thought that the government was going in the right track, but that's an example where major change could occur if we could really target these barriers to those who need it most. But you're saying that there's not enough progress that's been achieved. We have not seen tangible achievements. We may be on the right track, but will the objectives be attained? That's another matter. It's very difficult to say. They're not collecting data to know whether they're in a position to change. Even other witnesses said today that they can demonstrate the number of initiatives they've started, but to know whether it has an effect in a tangible way, whether the objective has been achieved and somebody received the benefits, that's another matter. That's all for me. Thank you.
Your floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to finish up that last portion related to the barriers at financial institutions, just to get the Auditor General's comments on record. We heard, of course, from some of the folks at CRA or ESDC. Thank you for that contribution. I think that was a really clear answer for me to know that you must actually do that work within a financial institution before you access the Canada Learning Bond, which I think is evidence to why there's a significant barrier. It leads me to think of the people who can access financial institutions. You know, we've seen in Vancouver, for example, just 2 years ago, a high-profile case in the news of discrimination at financial institutions, bodies outside our regulation. It was a 12-year-old girl with her Indigenous grandfather. For the first time, she was going to go and open a bank account. She still today is traumatized because what had happened was the bank had called the cops, and these two were removed from the financial institution, and that young 12-year-old girl was arrested for no purpose. that is a reality in Canada today at our financial institutions. And so when I talk about the need to understand barriers, that's a real thing happening in Canada. That's a real family we know of in Vancouver. It's a real issue. And so when we're looking at these barriers, in particular to the Canada Learning Bond, is it appropriate to actually be utilizing, and oftentimes private sector corporations to do the vetting for us?
So I don't believe that the private institutions are doing the vetting for the federal government. They are the gateway to gain access to the benefits, and I think that's why we talked about really needing to have an integrated approach to help those who are hard to reach. Other witnesses have mentioned how complex it is to gain access to any of these benefits, and when individuals have to go to many places, institutions they may not trust, that is a barrier. So how are you doing different to try and reduce that is really the big challenge to get this hard to reach group.
Thanks so much, Auditor General. And I think that leads me to a question about the effectiveness of Canadian programs and how we get that support to folks. Sorry, how long? 30 seconds, how we get to actually that point. And I see these barriers are quite significant, but they also are matched with significant investments. And so, without diving too far into policy, it was actually mentioned by my colleague from the Conservative bench, simpler, larger benefits. I really enjoyed that idea because, guaranteed livable basic income is one of those larger benefits. We can eliminate many of these patchwork programs and actually institute an income-based program that assists people. AISH in Alberta is similar to that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Desjardins.
Thank you.
Turning now to MB Cram, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to continue with the Auditor General for my next round of questions. On page 4 of the report, it reads, "We estimated that the department and agency collectively spent more than $18 million in the 2021 fiscal year on targeted outreach activities." In your opinion, did the taxpayers get good value for their money?
I think our report highlights that the department's unable to tell us if good value for money was achieved because they couldn't demonstrate that their initiatives resulted in an increase in uptake and those hard-to-reach people actually accessing benefits.
Yes, that's pretty much what it says on page 11, a bit further on. It says, the agency and department did not know whether most of their targeted outreach activities had helped to increase benefit uptake rates for hard-to-reach populations. And so I'm wondering why does there seem to be this lack of measurement or lack of initiative to measure their activities from the beginning of the program?
I think that's a great question to ask the departments that you do have them here. I think we've heard some reasons, right? Some of the privacy concerns and some of the difficulty of knowing when it's a third party that is sort of the referral source, whether or not, the outcome of a tax return filed and a benefit sent is there.
Okay, so then maybe I will pose the same question to the representatives from the department. Why does there seem to be this lack of measurement from the beginning, and why does it seem to be such an afterthought or not done at all?
Do you want to name which department first?
We'll go around. Let's start with the CRA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think we've talked about some of the challenges that are there in terms of privacy and confidentiality, where we can target a specific initiative to a particular individual. But I think that it goes too far, I think, to say that we don't have any sense of the success that we're having with these outreach activities. And I go back to a point that we talked about earlier, which is trust, which can sometimes take a little bit of time to build. But as we do outreach into the communities, whether that's through the community volunteer program or our own officers going out, we can see the tangible benefits of what we're providing to the people. Can we document that it actually means somebody filed their return and got their benefit? We know in some cases it does, but we don't have the good aggregate statistics. That's something that we're trying to work on, but it does bump up against privacy concerns. And I think that that's just a challenge that we are going to have. But I think it goes too far to say we don't have any idea that these aren't doing good. And I wouldn't, my prescription would not be to stop doing them because we can't measure them accurately, but to try to find ways to better measure them within the constraints that we have.
And now the other department, Employment and Social Development. Do you have an answer to Mr. Cram's question?
Thanks so much. I'll just build on Bob's response and all of the issues that he identified that we struggle with in terms of barriers that we have in terms of tracking are true. But at the same time, one of the things that the Auditor General has identified and that we all agree with is that we need to work more collectively in terms of tracking the same information and sharing that information and measuring it the same way. And that is one of the obstacles that we have, is that we measure and track differently. And our focus has been on the actual outreach portion of it, to get out there and find those people and figure out how do we actually get in touch with them in non-traditional ways. So that has been our focus. And this conversation and the audit helps us just in terms of what does that mean with respect to actual outcomes? And I agree with Bob. We do have outcomes. We do have some very good examples of where we see the impact, whether that's providing services, virtual services and virtual clinics online, whether that's an increase in uptake and childcare benefit. The fact that it can't be exactly attributed back to that outreach initiative is something that we need to work on. But overall, we're actually seeing positive results in terms of reaching those hard to reach populations, and we'll continue to evolve our methodologies over the course of the coming months.
30 seconds.
So don't you have, though, a central database to keep track of the new applications that came in after you visit a particular region or community?
Yes, for sure. We do. We don't track them by individuals. However, we would say, I'll give you an example. So in 21-22, we did 5,605 engagements with community partners. Working with vulnerable populations. We went to 579 Indigenous communities. We served them through virtual activities and outreach support centers, and that resulted in over 30,000 services being provided. Now, we don't identify down exactly what that service is.
And I appreciate that. I'm going to have to end the questioning there. Our last member is Mr. Fragascatos. You have the floor for 5 minutes. I don't know if you want to continue this. These numbers sounded interesting, but it is your time for 5 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. My question, the question that I wanted to put is to ESDC on the Reaching All Canadians initiative and what insights have been gained there that could help to add to our understanding of the factors that contribute to hard-to-reach populations having such a difficult time getting access to key benefits and other supports. Is there lessons that you can share with us specifically from that initiative? Again, that goes to ESDC.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. One of the things that we struggle with, as I said previously, is that because they're an unknown population, they don't respond to what we do traditionally as government, whether that's mail outs, phone calls out, a stagnant Service Canada Centre or government department. So we have to rethink, how do we actually connect with them? So the example I would give you is during the pandemic, when they were trying to give people vaccinations, one of the things they discovered, and particularly in urban centres, was that there were a number of people that were shut in, a number of people over the age of 65 who were not coming out and who were not in care. We actually went to third-party organizations, people working directly with seniors, to get them to access those people that were shut in. And as a result, we were actually able to put people into GIS, OAS, and actually back pay them with money. So that lesson learned is we can't do things in very traditional government ways. We need to access the services that are already on the ground doing a lot of this work and who know those people. We obviously have other lessons learned as well in terms of building relationships with communities and not going in to a community and dropping off papers. We actually have to build those relationships and then connect with the individuals in those communities and support groups so that we can go back. We did that with CRA so that we can help get people to fill out their short form tax form so we could get people into child care benefits. We also helped, lesson learned, help them fill out the forms. It's not enough. These are complicated forms. Help them fill out the forms. And finally, I would say we had to change the literacy on our websites. We were putting our pages at a grade University 1 level, and we've reduced it now on average, as is benchmarked in a number of other countries, at grade 8. Those kinds of things, like lessons learned in terms of understanding pain points in the communities and with these individuals, helps us think about how do we get them the services that they are qualified for.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. With the final question, it goes to Commissioner Hamilton. Commissioner, in the introductory remarks that you made to committee today, you made reference to a detailed action plan that you have submitted to committee, but I think it's worth asking you specifically because you talked about key points there that would help to bring to life the recommendations that have been put forward by the Auditor General's office and which the CRA has agreed to. Could you point to which key points those would be?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, happy to respond to that. When I look at our action plan, certainly the first recommendation is that we should establish a joint effort, be more coordinated with the SDC, Stats Canada, to find ways to better report on what we're doing and improve the measures. And we talked about that extensively during this meeting. And we detailed a timeline that would see us form the governance for the ongoing participation of the three agencies. And that has been done. And we're going to keep working on that to look at better ways to update our data, to use different tools to try to get at the data that we really need, but work together as three departments and agencies on that. I think the other thing that we've talked about, which is another recommendation, is how do we get a better sense of what the results are and better measures and better performance indicators? What are we striving to achieve, and can we measure that better than what we are now, given some of the constraints that we've talked about in terms of privacy, confidentiality? But we're working together on that to see what we can do, come up with better key performance indicators together that will be meaningful, so that, you know, I would agree with what Laurie had said. When we do the outreach into communities, it may not be a one-to-one efficiency. We go in, we build trust, we get relationships, and then the benefits start to come. But sometimes it takes a little bit of time and effort to build that, because you can have some resistance in those communities. So we know there's benefits. How do we do a better job together of constructing good measures that tell us what we want to achieve, what success looks like, and then report on that. And I think the final thing is, how do we do a better job of presenting a seamless experience for vulnerable, hard-to-reach people, because there's many benefits out there. Some from ESDC, some from us, some from other departments, some from provincial governments, and we need to try to find a way to make that all make better sense to the people that are applying for them and are eligible for them. So I think that's the other key part of our action plan.
Thank you. Thank you. That I'm afraid the time is all out. We went a little over there, but I wanted to hear the full answer to that. So thank you very much. I want to thank all our witnesses for appearing today, both virtually and in person. I know the auditor is back here and our team very, very soon. So thank you again. It's good to see you. To our witnesses online, thank you for sharing your time with us today. We all appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you at some point down the road as well. Have a good day. I'm just going to keep the committee members here just for a few minutes. I just have some announcements, but everyone else is excused. So I'm just going to suspend for 30, 40 seconds, so if members could just hold their seats, but I will have you out of here by a half hour. Thank you. is Mr. Dong's priority, and it will remain that. But unfortunately, the deputy ministers were not available, and the analysts recommended that we defer until they are. They're actually off to the COP meeting, so they have a reasonable excuse to not be available. So in place for next Friday, November the 4th, I've scheduled in Systemic Barriers Correction Service Canada. Mr. Desjardins might wonder why not the marine study, and that is because I have a similar challenge with the Environment Commissioner not being here as well for that, because he's off to COP. So I do try to maintain, or I'm aware of priorities that I hear from members. So that's a change. We're going to try to get the hydrogen potential scheduled for November 18th. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. As well, I'm in the process of coordinating our meeting with Ms. Hogan, and I think I'm going to aim for a Monday evening outside of committee hours, but I'll be in touch with you. And Wednesdays here are difficult because of caucus. Thursdays, people tend to travel, and even Tuesdays. So my preference is Monday, a Monday evening meeting with her, but I will coordinate with you. Yes, Ms. Till what time? Okay. I'll tell you what. I'll send an email out to everyone, and I'll get some times then. Okay. Thank you. And if there's no other issues, I will end the meeting. I just wanted to bring up, and we will have time, I think, at our next meeting for a little business. We will be discussing committee business again very soon. Meeting adjourned.